Hey guys, how are you? Okay, we're live. I think everything is working. I'm having some Wi-Fi issues, so if anything goes a little wonky, I will re-record or reschedule. I will send you an email, but we're going to try to kind of make this work. So hopefully we'll be okay. I'm going to wait a couple of minutes and see if some people join in. I got a couple of emails from people who are going to be watching the recording, and it looks like some of you are joining now. So thank you so much for being here. I want to start pretty close to on time because, as usual, I have a ton of things to share in a little bit amount of time. But it's 5:59 now. We're going to wait just a couple of minutes. So if you're just logging on, just getting started, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat and tell me where you're from, where you're watching from, that would be awesome. And maybe just something you'd like to know about Genius Hour tonight. I would love to hear from you guys to kind of know what you want to know, and maybe I can answer some of those questions as we go. So if you'll tell me where you're from, maybe who you are, and something you want to know about Genius Hour, that would be awesome. And wait a couple more minutes and then get started. I'm super stoked about tonight's conversation. Most of you know I love to talk about Genius Hour, so it's going to be a fun evening. So name, where you're from, and what you hope to learn tonight. All right, and I'm going to mute for just a second as we get ready to get started. Hey, Marie, I'm so excited that you're here. I was just in San Angelo and got to say hello to you. So I'm excited to see you here. And we are definitely going to talk about what Genius Hour looks like in the everyday classroom. I think that's a big conversation right now and something we need to talk about. So thanks for that. All right. I know some more people are here. You guys introduce yourself in the chat. Just makes it a little, virtual is always a little awkward and weird because I can't see your faces, but I love to know where you're from and kind of what you hope to learn. Hey, Kara. Oh, this is actually Holly from HACO. Man, you're in my region, like right up the road from me. You have a lot of questions because you're new to this idea. Perfect. I'm super glad that you're here to hang out and listen. So hopefully you learn some things. And again, I'm right up the road from you, so we can always just meet, chat, all the things. So thanks for that. All right, so the rest of you, if you're typing your introduction, hopefully I'll see it as it comes in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started just so maybe we can finish a little bit early. I know we all have things to do tonight. Hey, Shauna, I'm glad you're here from Godly. Lots of Texas people. Jenny from Iowa. You've used Genius Hour with TAG middle school students. I think Genius Hour is so beneficial in middle school. Love the idea of Genius Hour, but know how to get high school buy-in. Such a great question, and we're going to talk about that. I'm actually working on some ideas with that right now because it is hard to get high school buy-in, so I totally get that. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but as I was kind of thinking about how do I want to approach this, what do I want to share that I think will be most meaningful, I'm going to do tonight's webinar about getting started. I'm going to share lots of practical ideas, so stay with me. I just have to get through some of the big ideas first. If you've ever seen me present, you know that's how I operate. But as we go through, I'm going to be sharing some of the myths around Genius Hour to introduce some of these ideas. And then, like I said, I'll share a lot of practical and try to address some of the questions that you guys have in the chat. So put them in there as you think about them. I'm a pretty good multitasker, so sometimes I can catch the questions. So be sure to put them in there, and maybe I'll catch them. All right. If you haven't heard me present before, and I know a lot of you have, these are my core beliefs. I'll go through these fairly quickly. I believe that every learner deserves an opportunity to experience new learning every single day. I believe that every learner deserves the opportunity to learn from productive struggle, to learn by doing, to share their work beyond the walls of the classroom. And ultimately, I believe that every learner deserves an opportunity to pursue their passion and purpose during the school day. Look, I just always say that these are the things that drive my passion for making Genius Hour happen in the classroom. And I don't want for 1 second for you to think that tonight I'm going to talk to you about somebody who's not in the classroom, like this is why you should do this. I think that's a terrible idea. I just like to share my experiences that I had in my own classroom with Genius Hour, what I've experienced now that I get to go visit classrooms and districts that are implementing Genius Hour and passion-based learning, and just share kind of what I've learned along the way. And so that's kind of what I plan to do this evening with you guys. I always tell my story by sharing this slide. That is exactly what my career looked like in education. I was a really passionate teacher for a really long time. And then all of a sudden, it was as if the lights went out and I lost that passion for teaching. And the reason I lost it is because what I was doing in the classroom wasn't meaningful for my learners. And so I had to figure out, what am I going to do to make the classroom a place that they want to be? And honestly, you guys, I needed it to be a place that I wanted to be. I had just lost every bit of my excitement for the work. And when that happens for us as educators, it trickles down to our learners. And I just didn't know how to reach this generation of kids. I didn't know how to teach to a group of kids who had access to information in their pockets. And I stumbled upon this idea of Genius Hour, and I learned everything. I learned a lot of what I know from Don Wettrick. Galeeds V, Denise Krebs, AJ Giuliani, Hugh McDonald, Joy Kerr. There are so many people that kind of went before me to lay the foundation for Genius Hour. And then my story kind of began from learning from them. And so as we kind of go through, I always like to say that if those people hadn't done the work that they did, I would certainly not be doing the work that I do now. I always like to ground us in this fact: if what we're doing in the classroom isn't meaningful for our learners, it's a waste of our time and theirs. And so for me right now, especially in education, I think so much of what is happening in the classroom is meaningful for the system, right? Like it works for the boxes we have to check. But what I'm saying is, if it's not meaningful to them, ultimately it's a complete waste of time. And I think that's why so many educators right now feel tired and exhausted and run down. I know there are so many reasons for that, but I think one of the reasons is there's not that feeling of getting that return on your investment. I remember those days in the classroom where my students would have an aha moment or a light bulb moment, or we would learn together and have this huge epiphany. And those were major and big, and I would go home feeling so great. But that was not the majority of my days. So many of my days had become like checking the boxes and doing the things I had to do and making sure that we were prepared for a standardized test. And I'm not here to suggest, as much as I want to, I'm not here to suggest that standardized testing, I don't know that it's going anywhere anytime soon, I guess is what I'll say. But what I will tell you is, just because that's the case doesn't mean our learners don't deserve a meaningful experience in the classroom. And so how do we balance that? How do we prepare them for the things that we are supposed to prepare them for, and give them an opportunity to experience something like passion-based learning? Hey, Dina, I'm so excited that you're here, Northern Indiana, hoping to start Genius Hour this year. That is super exciting. I can't wait to, and per your principal's, request to wait. I thought you said per your principal's request. I was like, oh man, that is awesome. Okay, so absorb all you want and ask any questions that you want. I'm excited that you're here. Okay, so if I had to kind of describe what a passion project is, a lot of people, I think, just like anything in education, we talk about it a lot. It becomes different things in different people's classrooms. That's why we're going to talk about the myths tonight, because I think there are so many things being said about Genius Hour that are just false. But this is how I would describe a passion project. Actually, to be honest, this is how ChatGPT would describe a passion project, but I love this definition. So I'm going to give you guys a second to read that. And then will you tell me in the chat some words that stand out to you? So as you look at this and you kind of see what a passion project is, tell me in the chat, what are some words that stand out to you? Yeah, driven by deep interest. That's a big part of Genius Hour for sure. And I think that ties back to the question we had about doing it with high school. Jenny, you were asking that. And I think that's one of the keys, is figuring out what high school students have a deep interest in is sometimes difficult. So we'll talk about that. Enthusiasm, creative pursuit, and voluntarily. Like sometimes it's like, what students do anything voluntarily? But the reality is, when we think about this generation of learners, I love it when people say to me, like, this generation just doesn't enjoy learning. That's not true. They do enjoy learning. They learn every day on their phones. They learn through watching short TikTok videos. They learn through watching YouTube. They're learning every day. They just learn differently than most of us did. And that learning differently makes us a little bit uncomfortable, but it's only through being uncomfortable that we're able to move the needle forward and create sustainable change. And so, as we think about that, don't get too wrapped up. I know it's easy, especially if you teach middle school or high school, to be like, huh, yeah, right, like they're ever going to do anything voluntarily. If you find what they're really interested in, if you can tap into that magical, like sweet spot of this is what they love and this is the work they want to do, they will do the work voluntarily. Yes, individualized enthusiasm, they choose deep interest, creative, particular topic. Perfect. So you guys had some of the things that stood out to me, same things, individualized, driven by a person's deep interest, enthusiasm, and the fact that they choose to do this work is key. And so I think it's important to, if your district is thinking about implementing Genius Hour, or even you're explaining it to your students, that there is a clear understanding of what it is. And so feel free to steal this definition. If you're introducing Genius Hour, we'll talk a little bit about that, but that is one of the things I wish I would have done a better job, is introducing Genius Hour to my learners to get that buy-in. I just assumed there would be buy-in. That was an incorrect assumption. And so this idea of getting them on board with it and understanding what it is and why you're making it a priority in the classroom is really important. And again, we'll talk about that kind of as we go through. All right. So you guys know, if you've ever heard me share anything at all on Instagram or here, this is what I talk about. The process of Genius Hour that really was a lifesaver for me in my classroom. I learned what Genius Hour was. I knew what a passion project was. But when we started it in my classroom, y'all, it was a complete mess. Like, just, that's the only way I know how to describe it. It wasn't a meaningful mess. It was just a mess. And so I knew we had to have a roadmap. And I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and the 6 P's just kind of like, oh, every part of Genius Hour starts with the letter P. They start with their passion and their purpose. They plan their project out. They pitch their idea to their peers. They work on a project to develop a product and then give a presentation. The other thing, I didn't know this when I kind of created these 6 P's, but as we started working through it, I started really paying attention to the life skills that were really starting to kind of pop out in each one of these parts of the process. And it was amazing. Like, my students were learning how to negotiate and how to share ideas and how to give feedback and how to receive feedback and how to stay on task. There were just so many executive functioning skills as well. And so many of our gifted learners need that, but so many of our learners in general need opportunity to work on those executive functioning skills. And this was an opportunity to do that. So this is the process that I'm going to talk about tonight. We're not going to go through, my typical presentation for Genius Hour is, we're going to go through each one of the 6 P's, and I'm going to tell you how to, I'm not going to do that tonight. What I am going to do is we're going to go through the myths, and I'm going to give you some practical things to use in each one of these parts of the process that I think will help you clarify some of the questions that you have. Okay, so this is the process. And I actually wrote about this process in a book called Genius Hour: Passion Projects That Ignite Innovation and Student Inquiry. In the follow-up email that I'm going to send you, I will send the link to order the book if you'd like to. I always tell people, before you use any of my other resources that I've created for Genius Hour, it really is a good idea to read the book, because in that book, I really kind of explain why this type of learning is so important and kind of give the 30,000 foot view, as well as drilling into each one of these pieces. Okay. I'm having to go back and forth in between screens because I don't know why. So just bear with me as I go a little slowly. All right. Myth number 1. Genius Hour is just free time in the classroom. I hear this all the time. Usually when I hear this, I do hear it from admin sometimes. Like, I don't let my teachers do that because it's just kind of like indoor recess words. I need a Dr. Pepper, and I haven't had one today at all, which is impressive. So it's just like indoor recess. And that is not true if it's done well. Now, I will tell you, I say this all the time. I have visited classrooms that are implementing Genius Hour, and sometimes I walk out of there and I'm just like, hey, please don't call that Genius Hour, because that is indoor recess. If it's just free time, if they're just, building something with Legos or just making something out of Play-Doh, that's free time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but don't call it Genius Hour. And so in this part of our time together, I really want to talk about how do we use the correct words and vocabulary and have the conversations so that parents, admin, students, other teachers understand that this is so much more than just free time in the classroom. Hey, Norita, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I'm so excited that you're here from Ohio. I am visiting Ohio soon, so I think in February. Okay, so here are all the things that Genius Hour gives our learners the opportunity to do. Number one, gives them the opportunity to learn by doing. So many of our kids are never going to learn something by regurgitating it on a worksheet. They're just not. Like, none of us look back on our school career and go, man, I am so glad that we did that worksheet 22.2, because that was when I really had my light bulb moment. I don't know anybody that has ever said that. What we do say is, you know what, when I experienced this, when my teacher explained it this way, or when I got to apply this, that's when real learning happens. And so Genius Hour doesn't have to be completely disconnected from the content. In fact, it can be an opportunity to take what they've learned and apply that in a way that it's connected to something that they're interested in. And I'm telling you, when you can connect what they're interested in to what you're learning in class, that is the like pinnacle of education. When that happens, that's when they make those connections and it sticks. It gives them an opportunity to do what I just said, to make those connections so that everything doesn't seem so isolated. I was talking to a group of teachers a couple of days ago, and we had the conversation of, think about yourself when you are at a conference or you're at a professional learning experience and everything seems disconnected. So think specifically about a conference and you go to session after session after session. Like, how do you feel at the end of the day? Tell me in the chat. How do you feel at the end of the day when you go to like a session, another session on another idea, another session? Like, what does that feel like? Or how do you feel at the end of the day? I'm so not a fan of awkward silence, but I know that sometimes it takes a little bit. Oh yeah, Holly, overwhelmed, for sure, and brain dead. And that's what our high school students experience almost every day. And sometimes that happens in elementary and middle school. Like, they're going to class after class after class. There's no connections. They're just learning content. Like, that makes zero sense. What if every kid had one Genius Hour project that gave them an opportunity to apply all of those things so that they could see the connections and how they utilize those things? Because I'll tell you right now, this generation, if they can't use it right now, they do not care, right? They do not care if it's on a test. They do not care if they need to know it next year. You are teaching, I say it all the time, but you are teaching a generation of kids that when you say you need to know this next year, they instantly think, I'll Google or YouTube it next year. I don't need you to tell me right now. It also gives them an opportunity to practice life-ready skills. And my favorite is it gives them an opportunity to dream big and impact others. Man, this generation gets such a bad rap sometimes for being selfish, or they don't want to do things. They do. Oftentimes, they're not given the opportunity. I think we would be shocked what these learners would do when they are given the opportunity to really dream beyond what they're experiencing every day in a classroom, and how they want to and would willingly impact others if they were given the opportunity. Okay. I love this quote from Christine Fonseca. This really, we're not talking just about gifted learners, but I do think, obviously I talk about gifted learners a lot. And so I didn't want to leave this out. And oftentimes with our gifted kiddos, there's this intensity, right? I know that I am an intense personality. My daughter is pretty intense. And so that intensity, you have some options. Those kids are either going to utilize that intensity as the driving passion that enables them to achieve amazing things, or it's going to be the turmoil that has the power to consume them as they learn how to try to manage that aspect of their personality, because that intensity doesn't typically go away. It's just part of who they are. But to tell a learner that that intensity is a negative part of their personality or a negative aspect of who they are is wrong, because in reality, they can utilize that intensity to do amazing things. Again, we just have to give them the opportunity to do so. So last thing that I'll say about giftedness in this webinar is that oftentimes there's some work by Robert Sternberg where he's talked about this idea of transactional and transformational giftedness. And transactional giftedness is really that idea of, I'm giving you this and we're giving you the gifted label. And in return, you're going to be valedictorian. You're going to make good grades. You're going to do these amazing things. But transformational giftedness is giftedness that makes a positive, meaningful, and possibly enduring difference to the world. And I think we want all of our learners to experience that. Why is school not a place where they're given the opportunity to make a positive, meaningful, and enduring difference on the world? I just think that should be key for so many of our learners. And unfortunately, we think we don't have time for it. When in reality, I think we don't have time not to do it. So I like this quote. Our goal is not to measure intelligence. It is rather to measure how young people hope to deploy their intelligence in the future. I think that's such a great quote and something we need to consider right now in education. Okay, so let's get into some really practical things about Genius Hour. So, because there's this idea that it is, just free time in the classroom, I think it's a really good idea so let me say this. When we first started Genius Hour in my classroom, my kids were 100% doing projects like, well, I'm interested in Legos, so I'm going to build a model of the school out of Legos. Or I'm interested in learning how to sew. So I'm going to learn how to sew. There just wasn't a lot of purpose behind it. It was just, I'm interested in this, so I'm going to do this. That was pretty much it. And what I've learned in working with campuses and districts, and honestly, the experience that I had in my own classroom, I wish I would have utilized these. So I call these purpose buckets. I haven't found a project yet that didn't fit into one of these buckets. But the first one is a mastery project. And so a mastery project is the opportunity to master a skill or concept by doing. And I like this because a lot of kids just want to learn how to cook. They just want to learn how to do something. And so I think there should be a place for that. We also know if you've come across or utilized Daniel Pink's work, if you haven't, write his name down. He wrote a great book called Drive, and he has a great YouTube video called The Puzzle of Motivation. I would watch the YouTube video if I were you and think about, hey, how does this really apply to our learners? Well, he talks about intrinsic motivation and what drives intrinsic motivation, and mastery is one of those things. And so if mastery drives intrinsic motivation, it makes sense for there to be a mastery project where students are learning how to do something just for the sake of learning how to do it. The second bucket is a kindness project. And a kindness project is the opportunity to impact someone else in a positive way. So a lot of times our students will start with a mastery project, like, I want to learn how to do this. But then they realize that when they learn how to do that, they can use that skill or whatever they've created to impact someone else. And so then it becomes a kindness project. And I've actually worked with several students that this has been the case. We've been working on their projects. This happened recently. I was talking to a student who was working on Genius Hour in his classroom, and I was visiting. And he was telling me that he was learning how to carve some things like out of, it had a name, but he was learning maybe whittle, or I think he was actually using clay. So it wasn't actually that, but he was these tiny sculptures he was making. And so he said it was a mastery project. But then he said, but you know what? My grandpa, this was a middle school student. He said, my grandpa is actually my outside expert. And when I decide to work on this, I go over to his house and we work on it together. And he said, my grandpa really enjoys spending time with me, and it makes him feel not as lonely. And I said, oh my gosh, then that makes it a kindness project, right? Like, it started out as you just wanting to learn how to do this, but you're impacting your grandpa in a positive way, which makes it a kindness project. Does that make sense? I'm going to pause for just a second and make sure these are making sense. So we've got mastery and kindness. Are you guys with me so far? It's so hard when I can't see your faces. Just yes, no, slow down, go faster. You know me, I like to make people happy. Okay, makes total sense. Thank you, Jenny. Absolutely. Thank you, Kara. Okay, so let's go on to the last two. So we've got mastery and kindness. The next kind of purpose bucket, or why they're working on their project, is an innovation project. This is the opportunity to create something new or make something better. I love this because I think so many of our kids think innovation is the same as invention, like, oh, I'm creating something that's never existed before. That's not true. Innovation could be just taking something that already exists and doing it better. And so we have those learners, right, who are always creating something, always like, that could have been done better, or man, somebody should fix that. This is their opportunity to do that. And so if they're creating a new service, creating a new prototype, designing something that exists in a better way, that would be an innovation project. And then finally, we have a perspective project. And perspective projects are the opportunity to change your perspective or the perspective of someone else. So maybe you need to learn more about an idea so you can see it through a different lens. Maybe you want to help someone else learn more about an idea so that they can see it through a different lens. Maybe a student wants to change the perspective of their admin around why recess is important. I don't understand why in education we only pay attention to the research that fits into the narrative, right? Like, or the agenda. Like, there is research that tells us that recess is important, play is important, and that we learn more through play. So taking that away or shortening it is probably a bad idea. And so just, you guys like how I'm fitting that in there. I think that a student working on a project to shift the perspective of play and why it matters would be a great project. So you can kind of see what that looks like. So we've got mastery, kindness, innovation, and perspective. And honestly, I haven't found a project yet that didn't fit into one of these buckets. So these 4 buckets are really helpful at number 1, taking a project from just being something that looks like free time to really having purpose behind it. Your learners know why they're doing it. And so one of the things that I think makes Genius Hour so much more meaningful and have a bigger impact on your learners is to have them write a purpose statement. And so that statement needs to be something like, I want to learn more about this by doing this so that I can this. And in that statement, before Genius Hour has even started, before they ever start working on their project, they have the what, they have the how, and they have the why. And the so that I can should connect back to that purpose bucket, right? The so that I can should be representative of kindness or innovation or mastery or perspective. So in that sentence, you have the what, the how, and the why. What do you guys think about purpose statements and having learners write that before they ever begin working on a Genius Hour project? Yes, no, maybe so. Super simple, but I would honestly just have your students put these into a Google slide deck, somewhere where you can access them easily, because what happens is this can become how you stoke the flame when it starts to fizzle out, because it will. Eventually that passion is going to start to fizzle out. I've heard a lot of people talk about passion and purpose as like a campfire. And if you don't, look, I don't camp. I'm not an outdoorsy person unless I'm at a baseball game. But I have heard that if you're building a campfire, that foundation is really important. When you build the wood and how you build it and what would you use. And if you don't take the time to build that well, that fire is going to fizzle out really quickly. And the same is true with Genius Hour. If you don't really take the time to build the purpose before starting on the project, that passion can fizzle out really quickly in our learners. And so you can use this purpose statement when that starts to fizzle out, like, hey, let's look back at your purpose statement. You said you wanted to learn more about this by doing this so that you could this. Have you accomplished that? And going back to that moment when they were excited and they wanted to do this for this reason can kind of reignite that flame and can be really powerful. So purpose statements serve a lot of different purposes in Genius Hour, but I think they can be really powerful and super simple thing to do. I'm not sure if I have this in the presentation, so I want to say it here. I know I'm going to come across it at some point, but let me just say it here in case I forget. One of the things that I think can be really valuable when you're introducing Genius Hour, along with the purpose statements, a lot of people ask me that, like, how do I get my students to understand what it is? It just seems so big. And like middle school and high school students are like, project, no, thank you. I'll pass. I know how this plays out. And so there is a great video. You guys have probably seen it. It's super old, called Kane's Arcade. And it's Caine. And it's a story about a little boy who builds an arcade at his dad's mechanic shop in East LA. And I'm telling you, in that video, all of the 6 P's are represented. Kane has a passion. He has a purpose. Then he has a plan. He pitches his idea to his dad. He works on a project, develops this amazing arcade, and then ultimately there's this big presentation. And so I love the idea of asking kids to watch that video and to identify the 6 P's within it. What was Kane's passion? How did Kane plan his project out? And letting them see, oh, that's what that looks like, or this is it. It doesn't have to be checklisty. It's just, it's a roadmap, right? These are the places we're going to stop. These are the things that have to happen. But ultimately, everybody's project is going to look different. Holly, that's exciting. I'm excited that, or was the Kane's Kane's Arcade was transforming to your group. Tell me a little bit more in the chat if you can. I'd love to hear. Okay, so purpose statements. And here's the other reason that Genius Hour is so much more than just free time in the classroom. So I've recently, look, I even have it sitting here with me. I recently created a skills enhancement suite. That's what I've called it. I didn't want to call it a curriculum, and I actually had mine printed out. It actually comes in a digital form, but I had mine printed out and bound. And so these are just the different skill sets. So the skill sets are critical thinking, curiosity, communication, creativity, investigation, and leadership. And then there are 3 individual skills within each of those. So I'll show you an example. So like we have each skill set has individual learning experiences for each skill. So here's the skill set. It's critical thinking. I'm pointing on the wrong side. Here we go. Critical thinking. And for this lesson, it's decision making. And so there's a learning experience that gives kids the opportunity to practice that skill. And there are 5 lessons with each skill, which is why it's so thick. The reason I did this was because, number 1, I wanted people to know how many skills were addressed during Genius Hour. But number 2, I wanted people to know that it's a great, just use it by itself thing that you can use for gifted learners, because there are so many lessons to be learned. So we'll talk a little bit about where you can access that at the end of our time together, but I am making some changes to this and updating it. I'm also creating slides for every lesson, so it really will feel a little bit more like a curriculum if you wanted to use it as such. But the great thing about that resource, that sounded arrogant. One of the things that I feel like maybe is a great thing about that resource is that you can, it's really plug and play. I had several districts who were like, please just create the curriculum. And I finally decided I am not going to write something where it's like, use this, then use this. I wanted teachers to be able to say, I want to use this lesson here. I want to use this lesson here, because you guys are the designers and I don't know your kids. You know your kids better than I do. And so it comes with kind of a scope and sequence that says, hey, this is what this lesson is going to help your learners do within the Genius Hour process. And you kind of decide when you want to use that. So again, I'll tell you at the end. Actually, I'll just go ahead and put in the chat where you can access that. But just know when I email out, I'll send out the link to this as well where you can access it. And I am making some changes to it. So just know that those changes are coming soon, and I'll be sending a big update. But those changes will be going out to anybody who has purchased. So if you've purchased it, you're going to get the changes. Once the slides are done, just full transparency, the price will go up a little bit, but to those who have already purchased, I'll be sending the slides out to them. So just FYI, that's kind of how that's going to work. But I created that resource only because I wanted people to see how many skills can be addressed during the Genius Hour process. So just looking at this image, it's certainly not free time in the classroom if we are intentional about making sure these things are happening. Yes? Okay, moving right along. So myth number 2, Genius Hour, a Genius Hour project is just a fancy word for a research project. Now, I think this is another reason when high school and middle school kids get kind of like, I don't really want to do this, because it starts to feel like a research project. And I think it's also important for our elementary kids to know that this is different. Now, I don't want you to hear me suggesting that there's anything wrong with the research project, but I think we have to know the differences so that we know when to do which, right? When do we want them working on a research project, and when do we want them working on a Genius Hour project? First of all, Genius Hour is driven by passion. It's what they're interested in. Research projects are typically driven by objectives. Genius Hour is more flexible. Research projects tend to be more structured. Genius Hour is creative, and research projects tend to be analytical. And then the biggest difference is this. If I only get to say one sentence on this, like if somebody asks me and I just want to say one thing, this is always my answer. And I don't know why my graphic isn't showing up there, but it is what it is. A research project results in information. A Genius Hour project results in action. So when we're thinking about a research project, the outcome is typically going to be information. You look up information, you do the research, you put that research on a poster or on a trifold, or you write a paper. A Genius Hour project is going to result in them doing something. There is action involved. It is not finding the information may be a part of it, But then there has to be this opportunity to do something with that information. And that, I think, is the key difference. So if you're wanting your students to just find information and share that information, that's a research project. If you're wanting your learners to be driven by action and to do something based on what they've learned, I think that's when I would lean more toward a Genius Hour project. So does that make sense, that difference between a Genius Hour and a research project? I think that's key and something we definitely need to know. Oh, look at that. There's the slide that I was going to share. Because I think you can talk to your kids in showing Cane's Arcade about, you could even do a Venn diagram, right? I always tell people I'm obsessed with Venn diagrams right now. I don't know why, but doing a Venn diagram of a research project and a passion project, or a research project and a Genius Hour project, and letting them compare and contrast. What's the same? What is different? So that there's clarity around that before you even start, and it doesn't feel like a research project. All right, number 3, Genius Hour is only for gifted learners. Not true. It can be done with any of your learners. And I honestly think, I'm so glad, Dina, I'm so glad that clarified for you. I really think that Genius Hour can be an opportunity for our learners that are not going to learn it in any other way to experience learning by doing. I think about those struggling learners who, I can't tell you how many times, and honestly, I think about my own time in the classroom, and I was guilty of this. Like, I would do something one way, a concept or an idea, I would teach it one way, and then during intervention time, we would just do it again, like harder, faster, more, right? And you're just going to keep doing it until hopefully you get it. That's not what learning looks like. Intervention should be something different. They have to learn it in a different way. And sometimes when you can connect it to what they're interested in, or you can connect it to what they're passionate about, that's when they have that light bulb moment. And those light bulb moments is what have to happen in order for kids to, number one, want to be at school, and number two, want to be able to be invested in whatever is happening in the classroom. I'm getting a little bit distracted in my head because, first of all, that happens a lot. But second of all, I heard a quote the other day, and I cannot remember who said it, but I did not say it. It was from someone else. And he said, our learners are either going to be running to school or from school. And I thought that was such a great point, because we want them running to school, right? We want them to be excited about it. It should be something that they look forward to. And I think Genius Hour can open the door for that to happen. Okay, so I say this all the time, but I also think that when we think about giftedness and identifying gifted learners, like, y'all, there are a lot of gifted learners sitting in classrooms right now that they're not identified. Nobody's even thought about the fact that they could be a gifted learner because they don't play the school game well, right? They're probably never on the A honor roll. They may not be compliant. They probably ask the hard questions. But I'm telling you, and I'm just going to say this out loud, I have visited a lot of schools and go into the classrooms, the gifted classrooms, and I think to myself, and sometimes say out loud, like, this, you guys have a group of high achievers, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, sometimes high achievers are gifted, but to have a room of just high achievers and to call that your gifted program, you're missing some kids, right? Because gifted learners don't fit into a box. They don't all look the same. And so I just say this all the time. You have kids in your classroom that may never pass a unit test, or they may never do well on a worksheet, but they can go home and put a car back together, or they can go home and speak 3 languages. And you're never going to know that if all we're asking them to do is complete worksheets and take tests. We will never see those kids for who they are. And if we never see them for who they are, we can't support them in the way that is best. And we can't give them learning opportunities that are going to give them those light bulb moments. And so I just, like, we have to give them opportunities to show us, who are you? What do you do well? How do you learn? How do you make connections? Because they're not all going to make it in this cookie cutter way. That's just not who kids are. And I know you guys know that for sure. And sometimes I'm oftentimes speaking to the choir. It is our system that needs to hear this. But I think it's important to say out loud. And the more we say it out loud, hopefully, eventually, there will be some change. All right. Oh, we're going backwards. All right. So one of the things that I oftentimes talk about when we address this idea of Genius Hour with all of our kids is the importance of thought partnership, because whether or not it's a struggling learner or a gifted learner or just, a classroom learner, like, thought partnership can be really powerful. I'm excited. I'm hoping to do some work around this idea of thought partnership in the future, because this is something I'm really focused on right now. But using that vocabulary in the classroom instead of peer tutoring is not a bad idea, because we don't want our students to graduate and be peer tutors. I always say I've never sat at my desk once and thought, man, I could really use a peer tutor right now. No, but I have sat at my desk and thought, man, I could really use a thought partner. In fact, I have a thought partner. Her name is Carrie Espin. I work very closely with her. And thought partnership is really a lot of times what drives a lot of the work that I do. And so utilizing thought partnership throughout Genius Hour can be really, really powerful, giving students the opportunity to partner up with their thought partners during each part of the process. So I'll give you an example. And again, I'm not showing you guys these things so that you have to go purchase them. You can create your own, or you can use mine. It's totally your call. I just want to give you the idea. So I also have these student learning guides for Genius Hour. You can also find those on that same link that I shared with you. But in each one, I have at the end of each part of the process, passion, plan, pitch, project, product, presentation, there is a place for learners to document their thought partner connection. So let me show you really quickly. So you can see kind of thought partner connection, and then it tells them some questions they can ask for that specific part of the process, and then a place for them to kind of document the conversation that they had. Thought partnership during Genius Hour just gives them the opportunity to hear somebody else's perspective about their project, and for somebody to push back on their ideas, like, have you thought about this? Or, oh, do you really think that's going to work? I think this might be a barrier. Really powerful, and can give our learners a different perspective when it comes to their project. So if you want to access these thought partner cards, I have these already created. They're just PDFs. You are welcome to access those for free. I think I have the link. This is what they look like. And again, you could print them out as little cards for your students to use. They're just kind of question stems for them to use throughout each part of the process. Here is the link for that. So if you want to take a picture of that, I will also include that in the follow-up email that you'll receive with the resources. So make sure you check that out. What do you guys think about thought partnership during Genius Hour? I'm going to pause for just a second and get your thoughts on that. Are there any questions about that? Again, I think that happens. I think they work with their thought partner during each part of the process. So after they finish passion, they meet with their thought partner. Plan, meet with their thought partner. Pitch, meet with their thought partner. I'm going to pause just a second and get your thoughts and see if there's any questions so far. Oh, perfect. Dina says they already do lots of peer work, so this would be perfect. So your students are already comfortable with that. It just kind of takes it up a notch and gives them an opportunity. Jenny says, I like the idea of giving them time to work with a partner. Would need to teach them how to thought partner correctly. Exactly. And that's really what those questions are for, because they're not going to know how to work with each other at first. You're going to have to tell them, these are the questions that you're asking and responding to. And that's what those thought partner question cards are for. So you guys check those out. There's the bit.ly. It'll just be a PDF that you can print out and use however you want. All right, we're getting close, you guys. Myth number 4, Genius Hour requires a ton of time and resources. I honestly think this is one of the biggest barriers to people implementing Genius Hour. I hear this more than anything is, Andy, I just don't have time, or I just don't have resources to make this happen. I don't have a lot of the things in my classroom, and I can't afford to buy that for all of my students. You shouldn't buy it for all of your students. So let's talk about resources first. And then we'll talk about when you can implement Genius Hour. At the beginning, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Marie who said you were wondering how to use this in a regular classroom. And so we're about to talk about that, just a heads up. Okay, so when we think about resources, I think a lot of teachers, because we like to make our students happy and we like to meet their needs and give them what they need, we tend to say like, oh, I've got to have all of this stuff in my classroom and I just don't have those things. You don't have to have those things. What I would do is I would send out a note at the beginning of our implementation of Genius Hour. And I would say, hey, we're starting Genius Hour. Here's what it is. Here's what we're going to be doing. And if you have these things at home, we'd love to have them in our classroom. Would you please send them? Collect recyclable things, of course, and just keep them in your classroom as your students need them. But look, if your students are working on a project and there is something that they need that you can't get your hands on or they can't access. Do you guys remember, this is an old strategy, but you remember Scamper? Like, it's been around for a long time. If you haven't heard of Scamper, remember, it's like, what can you substitute? What can you combine? What can you adapt? What can you minify or modify? Put to another use. Like, it just gives them, it's that creative thinking about, hey, how could I look at this in a different way? Holly, I love Scamper too. And so I like the idea of, if your students can't get a resource, like if they can't get a material that they need, have them Scamper it. Like, hey, what could you substitute instead? Or what could you adapt? What is something that is close enough to that material that we could adapt and give them an opportunity, so that you're not solving their problem for them? This is a great opportunity for them to, number one, have ownership in their project. This isn't about what can your teacher do for you. This is your project. Number two, it also gives them an opportunity to think creatively and to solve a problem. If you haven't seen that great scene, I should have put it in here, but there's a great scene from Apollo 13 where they're trying to, the whole square peg in a round hole, and they have to create, basically to save the lives of those men, they have to create this particular, I don't even know, particular thing. And they start to build it, and they just have all these random materials, and they've got to figure it out. And there are things like that happening every day. And so this is a really real skill that we can give our learners the opportunity to practice by just saying, hey, you know what? We don't have that here in the classroom, but I'll tell you what, I know you are a thinker, and I know you can think beyond that. So let's just use this strategy of Scamper and try to really consider what might we use instead. So using Scamper, not a bad idea to come across resources. So if you're thinking to yourself, there's no way I could get all of the things, you don't have to get all of the things. It's not your job. It's their job. It's their project. They'll figure it out, I promise, especially if it's something that they're interested in. Okay, when should students work on Genius Hour? Well, I think Genius Hour can be utilized as a curriculum in a GT pull-out program, 100%. It could be what they do. There are so many skills addressed, all of those things. It could also be utilized as extensions for early learners. Like, I also like the idea of everybody starting out with a Genius Hour project at the beginning of the year, everybody doing passion and purpose together. So remember, passion and purpose go together. That's the first step. So everybody does passion and purpose together, and then everything just kind of runs in the background. So if they finish their work early, their Genius Hour project is always there for them to work on. Some students might move quickly through their Genius Hour project because maybe they always finish their work early. Some students may not ever finish their work early, but anytime you have downtime in the classroom, so maybe something happens and an event falls through and you guys have an unexpected 30 minutes or an hour, or at whatever, you finish class 10 or 15 minutes earlier than you thought you would. All of those things, that is when, okay, it's Genius Hour time. You guys get out your projects and get busy, and they are always just kind of running in the background. It could also be a scheduled part of your day. So, hey, we're going to give Genius Hour an hour a week, or we're going to do 30 minutes a week. I know some people who say we're going to give it one day of 6 weeks. There are no rules. It's not, a lot of people think, well, it's Genius Hour, so it has to be an hour. False. It does not have to be an hour. It can be whatever you want it to be, need it to be, whatever you can make work in your classroom. So what do you guys, is that helpful, those ideas of either using it as a curriculum for a GT pullout program, which I love, but also running it in the background with all of your learners so that it can serve as an extension or something for them to do during downtime. And also, it could also be a scheduled part of their weekly learning experiences. Perfect, Holly. Hopefully that was helpful. Okay, and Marie, if you're still here, I hope that answered your question about how to kind of run it in a regular classroom as well. All right, moving right along. Number 5, Genius Hour is impossible to manage. So when I talked about Genius Hour running in the background in a regular classroom, some of you were probably thinking, yeah, right, Andy McNair, like that sounds like a great idea. They're going to constantly be asking me a question. I'm going to be trying to work with other learners. Like, you can't just run something in the background. Yes, you can. And I'm about to show you how. You can do it. You just have to be intentional, and you got to think through it and think about it a little bit differently. So let me kind of show you that. Jenny says you've done it as a pull-out program, but oh, it's so exciting. You guys are going to do it as an actual class. I'm so excited about that. Dina says, I like the thought of kiddos who reach early mastery of skills having Genius Hour in the background. Yeah, I just think that makes so much sense. And then you don't have to design an extension every time. And you could even challenge them to like, hey, whatever we did in class today, I want it to show up in your Genius Hour project today. Like, I want you to use the skill that we learned today, either the standard or the skill. So if it's a standard, we all know there are those standards that are like, nobody's going to use that. It's not going to fit into any project. They are only learning it so they can the test. Those standards do not need to be woven into Genius Hour. But hopefully that day they also learned a skill. So I had a teacher tell me one time, he has been teaching for over 40 years. And I always say when he talks, I listen. And so he told me, he's actually here in our region. And he said, hey, Andy, I teach advanced calculus or pre-calculus. And he said, so to be honest, there are things that I teach in my classroom that they're never going to use when they walk out of my classroom. But he said, I always remind them that every day there is something in my classroom that you can use beyond the walls of the classroom. It might be the standard or it might be the skill. So if it wasn't the standard, it might be the collaboration that we wove into the day. It might be the critical thinking that you had to use to solve these problems. It might be the reflection that we did at the end of class, but there is always a skill. And I love that perspective so much. Like, when they're working on Genius Hour, you can ask them to weave in the standard or the skill, which I think could be really powerful. Kara, I love that. This would help your dyslexic students that are so smart, but maybe don't show that on a traditional test. Absolutely, Kara. And I would tell you that some of those students are probably maybe gifted learners who may just not be able to showcase that in the traditional way. And so being able to see that giftedness through the projects that they work on, I think they would blow people's minds. I think there are so many kids sitting in classrooms right now that would just blow us away if we would just get out of their way, right? If we would just stop trying to control every part of their school day. They would demonstrate so much. Okay, so it's not impossible to manage. And let's kind of, in our last little bit of time together, let's talk about what this looks like. So remember, we talked about the process. And on this graphic, I've shared this on Instagram. Look, I share more about Genius Hour on Instagram than I do anywhere else. That's just where I talk about it because that's kind of the community. And so resources, ideas. I also have a Genius Hour. If you go to my Instagram profile, there's a little book that looks like a guide. And I kind of took a little break from it because things got really crazy and things are crazy right now. So I'm trying to just kind of catch up and take a breather. But I have a guide, and on that guide, I just answer like questions. Like people will send me a question about Genius Hour and I'll do a video and answer that question. So definitely check that out. But this graphic that I put on Instagram shows Genius Hour, the 6 Ps from a little bit of a different perspective, in that instead of the circle that I shared in the books and that I've always shared forever, this divides it into 2 parts. So you've got passion, plan, and pitch. That's the prep. And then that project itself is the project, the product, and the presentation. So something to think about. I want to say here too, just so I don't forget, if your students get confused with the difference of project and product, because a lot of kids think, oh, I did a project. They really mean they did a product. They made a product. They created a product. The project is the doing part. You're working on the project, but the outcome of that project is the product. And so I always tell people in my framework or in this process, really project, I know it's not a verb, but it kind of is the verb here. Like this is what they're doing. And then ultimately we want there to be hopefully a product. And sometimes that product is just the learning that happened when things didn't go as well as they thought it would. All right. So this is how I think you can set this up. Let me see. I don't know what this is. Hang on. I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know what that letter is in the middle of it. Pretend that's not there. I may have to put that on there on accident at some point. All right. So you can see this was the first bulletin board I ever created. This was back when we had pitch before plan even, and we worked it. I went and created this bulletin board the night after I woke up with the 6 Ps, the day after. And so really I had a QR code for each part of the process. And when my students got to that part, so when they were on passion, there was a video from me explaining explicit instruction. This is what passion is. This is what you're going to do in this part of the process, step by step. And then here are the resources that you're going to use. So I had a Weebly, I had a website that they would go to. It had the video from me, and then the resources. If I was using this today, I would probably create that in Microsoft Flip. It used to be called Flipgrid, but I would create a grid or a group, and each topic, I would create 6 topics: passion, plan, pitch, project, product, presentation. And on each topic, I'd have a video of myself sharing, and then your students can share below. It's a great place to manage the process. And that way, when a student comes up and interrupts you while you're working with a small group and is like, hey, I'm on pitch, what do you want me to do? All you have to do is say, go scan the QR code, right? Or go to that link in Schoology. You can also put the links in your LMS, whether that's Google Classroom, Schoology. You could have a page dedicated to Genius Hour or passion projects, and they just go there and they click on whatever step they're on. But again, you want a video with explicit instruction from you on what they do during that step, and then maybe a frequently asked questions page, and then the resources that they need for that part of the process. All right, I'm going to pause for just a second and see what you guys think about that. I'm going to change slides because I don't know why that circle is there and it's driving me crazy. All right, what do you guys think about managing it that way with videos so that you don't have to stop your instruction every time a kid has a question? Yes, Jenny, I agree that this type of learning is for sure perfect for twice exceptional learners. Absolutely. Okay, perfect, Marie. Yeah, I thought you'd like that. I was thinking about you because I was like, it is hard to do in a classroom of 25 kids, 30 kids, but I think the videos can really be helpful. I think this can be especially helpful for high school students. I think what we want to consider, I want to make sure I address that. I think what we want to consider with high school students is, instead of going in and telling them what they're going to do, maybe going in and asking questions about what they would like to do. So, hey, if school could be anything, if you could, look, we all have to be here during this time, but if we could dedicate some time, what are some things that you would like to do? And inevitably, they're going to say things like, I want to choose what I want to learn about. Somebody's going to say, I would love to create video games. Somebody else is going to say, I really would like to, they're all going to have these ideas, and they're not going to have any clue that you have a solution for that. But then at the end, instead of coming in and saying, hey, we're going to do Genius Hour and you guys are going to, that feels checkboxy. Like, you have to get them. I think we want to do it through questioning. Like, what do you guys want? And then, hey, I think we have a way to make this happen. And maybe don't even call it Genius Hour, like calling it passion projects. A lot of kids know what passion projects are. People have passion projects. I've worked with a couple of people who are retiring, and they are doing their passion projects to figure out their second act. Like, it's not just a school thing. Passion projects go way beyond that. Hey, I think it's Lori. I may be saying your name wrong. I'm excited that you're here from Alabama. And 3rd grade is such a great grade level to get started with when it comes to Genius Hour. One of the things that I say, because we have different grade levels represented here, is here's how I think about Genius Hour. I think in kindergarten through 2nd grade, I really think it's a class project. So I always say, if you teach kindergarten through 2nd grade, I love the idea of having a wonder wall and then letting your students vote. They can't vote for their own, but they vote on a wonder that they want to explore, and then you guys do a passion project around that wonder together. 3rd through 5th grade, I feel like, can be group projects. I would not let them choose their groups. I would let them figure out and identify their passions, and if they have similar passions, they can work together. But 6th through 12th grade, I really feel like should be independent projects. Like, those kids should be working independently on their projects. They can collaborate and be thought partners, but they're working individually. So 3rd grade, I think, is a great time to introduce the idea of maybe doing group projects and working together. So, all right. So Genius Hour myths. It is not just free time in the classroom. It really is an opportunity to be purposeful and for our kids to dream big and impact others. Genius Hour is not just a fancy research project. Remember, the difference is this. Genius Hour research projects, the outcome is going to be information. Genius Hour, the outcome is going to be action. Genius Hour is only for gifted learners. It's, in fact, beneficial and amazing for so many of our gifted learners. It does not require a ton of time and resources, and it is not impossible to manage. It is actually really simple to manage if you have the tools and resources to do so. So that being said, I have some of those tools and resources that are available to you. So stay tuned, because I'm about to share with you where you can find all of that. If I could give you my 3 biggest pieces of advice, anytime I share this at a conference or with a district, I always share these 3 things. First of all, it is important to be patient. It is going to feel weird, especially if you're like me and you've been a fairly traditional teacher. Oh my gosh, y'all, when I first started Genius Hour, I was like, I'm going to get fired. This is a terrible idea. Because it was just so weird. It was just a mess. And then all of a sudden, when we began to implement the process and everybody started to settle in, it started to feel like a meaningful mess. It's always going to be messy. That's the beauty of it. But I always say it is 100% okay for learning to be messy as long as it's meaningful. And so sometimes it's going to feel like you're doing something wrong in the beginning. You're not. I had a teacher call me not too long ago, and she was just in tears. And she said, Andy, I'll never do Genius Hour as well as you did. And I said, oh my gosh, I think I have maybe given you a false perception about how I did Genius Hour. I only share the good projects because I want you guys to do it. But there were some really bad projects. There were some really bad times. I went home crying so many nights of just like, am I doing the right thing? It's okay. Like, that's part of it. That's part of doing things differently. We're innovating, and it should feel a little bit weird. So be patient, because don't quit just before it gets good, because it does get good. And when those passion projects become those light bulb moments, oh my gosh, it makes me miss the classroom so much. And so I can't talk about it for long, but it just was a game changer for me and for my learners. You also want to be practical. Have a plan and think through what you're going to do if things don't go the way you and your learners expect. So we're going to have this plan. This is the process we're going to use. This is what we're going to do. But I love the idea of doing a pre-mortem. If you haven't heard of a pre-mortem, you can always check that. I think I just talked about it on my podcast the last time I recorded, but it's basically just thinking about, hey, you just pretend whatever your idea was has completely died. And you look back on it and say, hey, this is what didn't go well, and this is what I could have done differently. So you can always Google a pre-mortem. It's a business strategy, but do a pre-mortem for the Genius Hour experience and really think through what are going to be the barriers, what could go wrong, what might the pushback be, and how are you going to respond to that? And then finally, be purposeful. Know why you are making Genius Hour a priority, and don't apologize for it. Because honestly, you guys, I'm telling you, if we don't start moving in this direction, if we don't start giving learners in public schools the opportunity to figure out who they are and how they learn, and to learn by doing, we are going to continue to lose kids, and we're going to continue to have kids who are disengaged, uninvested, and don't want to be there. And it should be anything but that. And so really know why you're making this a priority, and refer back to that when you get frustrated or when you start feeling a little bit lost. You can always email me. We can hop on a Zoom call. I will support you in any way that I can. Again, not going to be easy, but it is going to be 100% worth it. So my contact information is here. If you want to scan that QR code, that'll really put everything into your phone, all the things. But you can also make sure you follow me on Instagram, because that's where I share most things Genius Hour. My email address is there, and then my website, andymcnair.com. Again, I'm about to update these resources. But even if you access them, you will get the new resources as soon as they come out. So they're just, I do things really quickly, because I always say I don't struggle with my ADHD, but my friends and family struggle with my ADHD. So I tend to do things really quickly. And then sometimes I find like, oh, these things should have been flipped, or I should have done this differently. And so I'll just make those changes. But that's what I love about digital copies, is I can make those changes and then share them with you guys. So I will be sending out an email tomorrow with a recording of this video, and also all of the connections to all of the things that I mentioned throughout our time together. So I guess the last thing that I want to say to you guys is just thank you so much for the work that you do every day, whether you work with gifted learners, whether you're in a general education classroom, an administrator, whatever it is. I know that it is not a particularly easy time to be in education right now. But just thank you for the work that you do. If you have any additional questions, I'm going to hang out for a little bit. If you want to put those in the chat, I'll be happy to answer those. But if you need to go and spend some time with your family, or just like chill out a little bit, I understand that as well. So thank you guys so much for being here. As always, stay tuned. I'll be doing another webinar next month that I'll announce through the email list. So make sure you are a part of that by going to my website, andymcnair.com. Okay, I think I've said all the things. I appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you soon. I'm going to hang out, so it's going to be a little awkward for a minute, but if you have questions, comments, anything you want to share in the chat, I'm going to watch that for a little bit, and then I will end the stream. All right, bye, you guys. Oh, Marie, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Very sweet. If you guys have any questions, just put them in the chat. Yeah, Jenny, you can absolutely just contact me. So you can text me, you can email me, you can whatever you want to do. I am 100%. I will help you in any way that I can. And if I don't know the answer to something, I will try to find someone who does. Oh my gosh, Dina, thank you so much. And I enjoyed that conference so much. So you were in Indiana. And yes, those core beliefs are so important. So thank you so much. I had a blast at that conference for sure. So that means a lot to me. Kara, thank you. I know my enthusiasm can sometimes be a lot. Look, here I go, apologizing for my intensity, but I'm so glad that it refilled your bucket, and I understand the empty bucket. I have been there. So I totally get it. I appreciate you guys being here. I 100% mean it. If you guys have questions, feel free to contact me. Oh, yay, Narita. So I will see you when I come to Ohio. That's exciting. I can't wait to be there. It's going to be so fun. So make sure you come up and say hello, because I don't always remember names, faces. So for sure, come say hello. Dina, that's exciting. Hey, let me know when you pitch, if you need any ideas or things you should say. I have a whole list, so I'm happy to help you with that. So exciting. That is awesome. I'm excited that you're starting the book study. And if there's anything you need to, questions you have, things you want to know about the book study as you go through it, let me know. Okay, are we good? I'm always afraid that somebody's typing a comment right now, and I'm going to end it just as they press enter. Okay, well, I am going to go try to get a little bit of work done and enjoy all the Chicago Med, all the things come on tonight. So I'm excited about that. So I'm going to go chill out. You guys go do the same. And again, just thanks for spending your evening with me. Let me know. Yes, you can absolutely connect me if you have questions, comments, concerns, all the things. All right. Good night, you guys.